Welcome to what was supposed to be the Mac for the Blind Fall 2022 last online course number 6, but turned into the first 2023 course. This is all about backing up your Apple devices, both Mac and iOS. So I'm going to kind of straddle the line of both platforms, and really the emphasis here is on backing up your devices, whether you have Mac, multiple Macs, whether you have an iPhone, an iPad, and basically the importance of backing up. So let me first take that overall subject here into consideration. I've said this to many clients I've worked with one-on-one. I usually bring this stat out just to kind of emphasize my point. But Apple did a survey, I don't remember how many years ago. It's going back to like Leopard and Snow Leopard, when Time Machine first became available on Macs. And they found that PC and Mac users, it was something like only 16% of users were actually had some kind of a backup strategy in place. And that kind of horrified a lot of
Irene
people
Nakas has joined the meeting.
to think that only, less than 20% of users out there, whether you were a Mac or a PC user, were actually backing up your computers. And it's interesting because, blind people seem to be a little bit more aware of the importance of backing up than sighted people, in my experience. I mean, I'm giving a generalization here, but still, I can't tell you how many people I have interacted with over the years who have what I've come to term the magic box syndrome, where either they don't think about the fact that, they need to back up their computer, or they somehow think that this device in front of them has infinite space and it will just keep backing, you can just keep putting stuff on it forever and you never have to worry about filling up the storage. And God forbid, if the disk breaks or something happens, you never contemplate that as a possibility. And I'm always struck by two specific events or experiences that I have witnessed in my career as a assistive technology person. And oddly enough, both cases were just people who should know better. My brother's babysitter years ago, when he used to live on Long Island, the late girl who lived next door, she was actually a IT major, a computer science major, looking to go into IT at the time. She had all the family photos, all the family videos from vacations, holidays on her computer, and her drive crapped out. It was a MacBook, one of the last plastic MacBook models. And they ended up bringing the computer to me. My brother got an enclosure. We took the drive out of the computer. We connected it to my Mac, and no matter what I did, I could not get the drive to, actually mount. And in fact, I went out and bought Disk Warrior and stuff just to see if I could help this poor girl out. So long story short, she ended up taking it to a company that charged her family $1,500, and they were only able to recover, I think it was 31 or 32% of the material that was on the disk. So she lost an incredible amount of her photos and everything else. And then a few years after that, a very good friend of mine, I think he has passed away. I hope he's rest in peace, but he was a trainer, and he had his apartment broken into, and they stole his computer and they stole a lot of other stuff, and he did not have any backups of his computer. He never did
13059328856 has
Time
joined the meeting.
Machine, never did any kind of manual backups, and he lost everything. There was no way. He didn't have any off-site backups, nothing. So his whole lifetime of computer stuff was just gone. They never recovered the computer. They don't even know. Last I heard, they don't even know who broke into his apartment. So, lessons sometimes are learned the hard way. So I really preach with every client I work with at some point, Mac or iOS, the importance of backing up your computers, iPhones, iPad, if it's a family situation, really something you have to consider. Now, with a computer, it's easier in the sense that if you don't want to use any of the storage, options that are presented by Apple or third-party vendors, you can always manually back up your documents folder. You can manually, back up your most important, material on your computer by simply connecting an external drive or a thumb drive, something like that, having a network drive that you manually back up to, and that's fine. If that's at least a strategy that will enable you to save your most important data. The only quote downside to doing that manually is if you have to redo your system, your entire Mac goes down, or you're doing an erase and install, you have to bring everything back yourself. Which, if you're willing to take the time to do it, then that's fine. I've done it a couple of times in my life. I have, on a couple of occasions with my Macs, have decided that the best approach to putting the latest operating system on was to really just erase the computer, start it off as a brand new computer, and just manually put everything back on. But you have to have the mentality and the desire and the patience to do that, especially if you've been a computer user for a long time and you have accumulated a lot of stuff like me. That job could take weeks to get everything back on your computer exactly the way, at least the way I wanted it to. But I chose to do that. It wasn't like I was pushed into that situation. I could have restored from a time machine backup, but I didn't want to. I felt it was just that time. When you use computers and other, devices, you kind of get a sense of knowing when things are just not right. Things are just not working the way you're used to them. And sometimes it's gut instincts that just tell you, what, it's time that I just, maybe there's corrupted files in the OS that just can't be, fixed. Maybe there's some kind of a resource that's gotten corrupted that's really deep down. So you get to the point where you just say, all right, let me just start over again. And, kind of do it as I like to call it, the old school or the long way. But, all things being equal, Apple added a simple solution. I believe it was around Snow Leopard or Leopard, called Time Machine. And they wanted to make this backup system as simple and easy as possible so that the consumer would not trip over themselves trying to use it. And it really comes down to just taking an external drive, plugging it into your Mac, and letting the Mac do the work for you. Now, a couple of pieces of advice: choose a hard drive that has nothing else on it or that has no importance to you, because when you run Time Machine, the Mac will erase the drive and reformat as an APFS volume now. So it will erase any existing data. I have had people make that mistake and lose stuff that they had backed up from a Windows computer and they were planning on transferring to the Mac or something, or just had a repository of extra, audio books and stuff that they didn't want to fill up a computer drive with. So keep in mind that at least the initial, time you run Time Machine, it's going to erase the drive. Once the drive is formatted, the Mac will make a complete backup of your system. Future backups are referenced according to the changes that you make on the Mac. In other words, it doesn't just keep backing up the system over and over again. It only makes changes to the things that you've done since the last backup. So obviously, the longer you go between Time Machine backups, the more it's going to have to do. So if you get yourself on a regular schedule, either, if you have the ability to leave your Time Machine disk plugged in, or if you're doing it over, a network connection, that's fine. If you can't do those things, then just try to make a personal schedule where you depending on how much you do with your Mac, you want to at least once a week take the time to plug in the drive and let it do its thing. You can see, there'll be a progress. You can go into system preferences if you're running anything prior to the current Mac OS 13 Ventura. Or if you're in Mac OS 13 Ventura, you go into System Settings under General and find Time Machine, which I will show you in a moment here, let you hear it, and just to give you an idea of where to look. Unfortunately, you're just going to have to trust me on older OSs. Both of my Macs are up to Ventura, so I can't show you the older way, but you simply open System Preferences and you just interact with the scroll area of the preference pane and navigate to Time Machine, Control Option Space on Time Machine, and you'll find all the options there. If you are running a backup, you'll see the backup status, how much is backed up, how much is left to go. You also can do a VOM twice.
Status menus. Zoom.us, Stat
And you can
OneDrive,
go over to
Creative
Time
Commons menu,
Machine.
Dropbox One, Excessive Focus, Now Play, Show Emote, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, Time Machine, Status menu.
And you can VO space.
Time Machine menu. Looking for backup disk ellipsis, dimmed. Stop this backup. Looking for backup disk.
So it's looking for my backup disk because I have it set up as a network. It's connected to a time capsule, so sometimes it takes a few moments for it to actually locate the disk. But you'll find in this menu the status. So if you are running a backup, this is another place you can go. Now, just keep in mind that your Time Machine icon may not, may be at the front of your menu, your extended menu, or it may not be. You heard all the different things on my extended menu, but it doesn't mean you're going to hear the same things because I've got Dropbox, I've got Backblaze, I've got a few other things that also I make appear on the status menu. So you're probably going to hear something entirely different, but just find the Time Machine and VO space and work your way down, and you can see, you can open the preferences from there if you don't want to go look for them, or you can see the status of a backup. You'll see the last backup, successful backup, so you can always keep track of when the last time your backup will have taken place. Also, a couple of other notes about Time Machine. The Mac will start harassing you if you don't do a regular backup. So if you go beyond like 10 days, you're going to start getting stuff in Notification Center that kind of prompts you and reminds you, hey, you should really do a backup. Now, the Mac will continue to do snapshots and keep those snapshots in case of an emergency, but you should really make sure you connect to the Time Machine backup drive and allow those snapshots to get converted to full backups. Now, the problem with snapshots is it's nice to have them, but if you need in an emergency to look at, like, let's say, Finder, you accidentally deleted a file and you realize, oh crap, I shouldn't have done that, and you want to use Time Machine to recover that file. If the backup is a snapshot, it may not necessarily allow you to actually access that particular backup until you have plugged into your drive. Just from my own personal experience, I had something happen over the holidays on my laptop where I was looking for a file and I hadn't backed up my laptop since August because I really don't, I'm sorry, since September. So I had to actually plug in my external drive and let it do its backup before I could go and actually see the date that I was looking for to recover the file. So just to, keep that in mind. But Time Machine is very powerful in the sense that, God forbid, you should need to restore your computer. Let's say the drive gets corrupted and you have to reinstall Mac OS, or it breaks down for some reason and you get a drive replacement, or maybe there's just some really, really weird stuff happening with something you did to the computer and you want to go back to yesterday and restore from there. You can do that through Time Machine. If you go into your recovery partition, depending on whether you have an M1 or still running an Intel Mac, you go into your recovery partition and you can restore from a Time Machine backup. Now, when you do that, it's going to put the Mac back to exactly how it appeared at the time of that last backup. So it saves you a lot of time and a lot of pain and a lot of effort involved to basically restore your Mac back to the way that it was before you run the update. Now you can use also Time Machine preferences to exclude things from the backup. The only reason you might want to do this is if you have limited space on the external drive. But in this day and age, you can buy 4, 5, 6+ terabyte drives fairly inexpensively. Now, people have asked me, well, can you use the drive for other things besides Time Machine once you get the backups going? The answer is yes, you can. You could partition the drive and you could use one half of the drive for, whatever manual backups or storage, and then use the other half of the drive just for your Time Machine stuff. And that's possible, but I always try to point out to people that, a backup disk partition will fill up eventually. So you want to try to, give that backup as much space as possible so that you have a really rich history, and just in case you need to go back several months, you're going to have a backup back in, let's say, just say hypothetically July of 2022, or even April of 2022. I mean, I can look at my backup history and I can see over a year. And you will get warned by the computer when your Time Machine disk is starting to become full. And what will eventually happen is the Mac will start deleting the most distant, backups to, make space for the newer ones. So it will kind of take care of itself as time passes, but just keep in mind that it will start deleting those old backups. So, again, it's really up to the user. The rule of thumb that I kind of try to, at the very bare minimum, advise people is have space that is twice the amount of space of your total hard drive capacity on your Mac, at the very least. So if you have a 512 gigabyte, SSD Mac, you want a 1 terabyte drive at the very least for your backups. If you have a Mac that has a 1 terabyte SSD, you probably want a 2 terabyte SSD at the very least to do your backups. That's just a basic rule of thumb that I've read, in various places in Apple knowledge base articles and user forums. It doesn't mean that you have to, abide by that. I think the time capsule drive that I have is 3 terabytes. But I may eventually go to something bigger and more direct as time passes, because it's only really backing up my Mac Mini at this point, because my MacBook Pro, I have an individual Western Digital drive that I use for backups, and that's a 4 terabyte drive that is specific to backing up Time Machine. So, that's kind of an overview of how your Time Machine works. Now, I'm going to now just give you a quick demonstration here of going into the system settings in Ventura. Now, it used to be called System Preferences. No longer. It is now called System Settings.
Time Machine, status system, appearance, window, table, appearance.
So as I think for those of you who attended my system settings lesson back in a couple of months ago, I kind of reviewed and explained how the settings now very much appear like
Row 38 expanded.
Your iOS settings. When you double tap on the settings app in iOS, you're going to find a very similar layout on the Mac. Now, the problem that this does present, though, is finding where things used to be. So Time Machine is one of those odd things that you're like, okay, where the heck did they put it? Well, it doesn't have its own separate preference anymore. So what you have to do is interact with the table.
In table, appearance, general.
Go to general, stop
out of table, vertical splitter, general, scroll area.
VO right arrow over to the scroll area.
In general, scroll area. 11 items about button.
What I do is I jump to the bottom of the screen. I have a full-size keyboard, so I can do VO Shift
Startup disk button.
End to take me to the bottom. But on a laptop, you can do Shift FN VO right arrow, and that will take you to the bottom of the window. So I VO left arrow.
Transfer a Time Machine button.
And there's Time Machine. It's the third thing back. So when you VO space on Time Machine,
group.
There, you interact
In Time Machine, scroll area.
with the
7
scroll
items.
area.
Time Machine. Time Machine backs up your computer in list.
So there's your list of disks that are available. Mine is only going to show my Oahu.
Oahu, John's Time Capsule. Local, 87.18 gigabyte available, connecting to backup disk. Stop back.
So it's the only drive that I have available for Time Machine backups and that I've chosen as Time Machine backups. Now, you can, by the way, have multiple disks for Time Machine backups. So if you're in a situation, for example, where you take your Mac back and forth from home and work, you could technically have a backup disk at home and a backup disk at work that you can sort of interchange. And the Mac will recognize either one of those disks if you want to do it that way. I mean, obviously, most people don't really need that. Some people who are a little bit more on the paranoid side will just have two disks anyway, and they'll alternate back and forth between them, which again, it's up to the individual. But just to keep VO right arrow,
Add button.
you have the add if you want to add a new, a drive.
Remove, dim options button.
And then you have the options.
Help button.
And
options
help. So
button.
the options is where you can find your
heading exclude automatically every hour. Backup frequency pop-up button.
So you can even indicate what kind of a schedule you want to put Time Machine on if you have a disk that is regularly connected.
Heading exclude from backups.
So then you have the
list.
Exclusions, which I have none. I don't exclude anything from the backup because, as I said, I'd rather have everything available just in case. I've had to restore from Time Machine backups a few times in my life. I've had to help other people restore from Time Machine backups. So I'd rather not do exclusions.
Add button. Remove. Done button.
And then it's done. So you can add an exclusion, you can remove an exclusion, and then there's the done button, which I'll just VO space
options
on.
Button.
And it takes you back to the Time Machine screen itself. So they've simplified the time. What you'll see if you're using an older version of the Mac OS and you're just looking at the Time Machine preferences, it will be a little bit different. They've sort of, with a lot of the preferences I've found, they've very much simplified and made things really come down to pop-up menus and check boxes and stuff. So in some ways they've made it easier for the user, but it's a matter of getting used to this system as an old dog trying to learn new tricks. It's sometimes very frustrating for me personally because I've gotten so used to knowing where to go to places and how to make changes that I've had to just totally change my thought process, and learn the new way, especially since I have to teach this to others. So Time Machine was something I had to spend some time, no pun intended, trying to learn how to, where things were and how things work now. So it's just a matter of going in there. And once you have it set up, you really don't have to do much of anything. That's the beauty of Time Machine. You really, as the user, you're not really put into a situation where you've got to do a lot of interacting. Only if you have to troubleshoot a disk once in a while, you might have to take some action. But for the most part, it just runs. And that's the beauty of a lot of stuff with the Mac compared to Windows, is you don't have to do a lot to keep your computer up and running in a smart way. Now, if you're not really interested in Time Machine, or for whatever the reason, you just think it's too much or whatever, you can use other solutions. To be honest with you, I don't know what the status are, but there was Super Duper and Carbon Copy Cloner. I know there were a lot of issues when Apple started, especially went over to the M1s, that there was a lot of security things going on where your Super Duper and CCC were not able to do complete clones. I don't know if those situations have been resolved. I do have Super Duper. I just haven't run it in a long time. It was one of the things I actually wanted to do over the break, the holiday week off, and never got around to doing it. But you also have off-site backups. You can do what I have a service called Backblaze it's a yearly subscription, and it literally will back the computer up to an off-site source God forbid, you have a house fire or something and you lose your computers or whatever, or somebody steals or whatever, you still have an off-site backup that you can, you can get all your stuff back if it's necessary. And I'm sure there's other solutions out there of that
Dave
kind.
Pinter has joined the meeting.
You also could, you could just, as I said, you could do it manually. There is rumors out there that I've read in places that Apple is actually going to have a time machine option for iCloud for Macs, where you actually can do time machine backups over iCloud. But I've not seen any specifics about when that's going to happen. And the, question that I would have in that regard is space. They charge for 2,200 1 terabyte subscriptions. So I guess if you're going to do time machine over iCloud, you're going to have to purchase a subscription unless it's part of the option they give you. Who knows? Apple's in the business of making money. Make no mistakes about it. They've done a lot of great things with accessibility. They make very consumer easy devices, but when the day is done, they're just like any company. They want to make money. They want to pay their employees. That's what it's all about. So I'm sure there's going to be some kind of a financial situation involved if they do an iCloud, time machine kind of solution. And it would be one of those things for me personally. I'd probably end up doing it just because I'm an Apple geek, but depending on what the cost would be, I'd have to consider that as well at this point. So that's basically from the Mac perspective. Time Machine is your go-to solution and the thing you really should be using as a Mac user. And it's funny because I have spoken to so many different people over the years, including clients I've worked with and I've been in touch with after training is done. And I'll just kind of, for the sake of my own curiosity, ask them, oh, you're doing Time Machine? Oh, when I think about it, I do. I've been meaning to do it, but, I just haven't gotten around to getting a disc. Oh, I looked at it, but, I just didn't really understand it. So it's always interesting to me that is still people still make excuses for, not doing something as simple as running Time Machine to back up their computer and safeguard your data. That's really what it comes down to with backups. You're safeguarding your personal data, your documents, your files, excuse me, everything you work hard to maintain on your computer. It's really not a major investment of time and effort just to have a backup strategy of some kind. And also, having multiple strategies is not a bad thing too. I mean, I use Time Machine, but I was also running Super Duper, but I do manual backups. I get teased a lot. I've been given the nickname or whatever you want to call it of Captain Redundancy, because I tend to have multiple hard drives that I put stuff on, particularly audiobooks and music and photos from the family. I keep in multiple places. God forbid something happens. Some people call it electronic hoarding. I don't exactly see it that way because I only keep stuff that really I use or would need to use in the future. I just don't store files and stuff for the sake of storing them. They have to have use, and I do delete things that I don't need. So, but still, backing things up is really something so simple and really thoughtless in some regard, but people still don't do it. Now that brings me over to the world of iOS. So again, here we have an interesting situation because for whatever the reason, you talk about phones and tablets and people don't think they have to back them up. It's just amazing. It's like, again, the magic box syndrome. Oh no, do you use iCloud backup? I don't even know how to do that. Okay, so what happens if something happens to your phone or your iPad, or if you need to transfer, you bought an iPhone 10 and now you're going to a 14. Oh no, I'll just set it up again. No, okay. No, if that's what you want to do, that's fine. So there is, again, a simple solution, that you can use on your iPhone or your iPad. Basically, it is iCloud backup. And it's very easy. You just turn it on, and it's kind of like Time Machine in the sense that you turn it on and you just let the system do the work for you.
Apple app settings.
So you go to settings.
Unmuted. Settings. Personal hotspot button. Settings. Search. Dictate. John Panarese. Apple ID. iCloud Plus.
So at the top of your settings is your Apple ID settings. So very, very convenient. We double tap. Okay.
Settings. Back button.
Now we look for iCloud.
Apple ID. Account image. John Panarese. Panarese. Name. Password and payment and ship. Subscription. iCloud. 250 gigabytes. Button.
Double tap on iCloud.
Plus 109. Manage account storage. Device backups. Heading.
Device backups.
iCloud backup. On. Button.
There you go. You find that. You double tap if it's off.
Backup this iPhone. Dimmed. Off. Backup this iPhone. On. Backup over cellular. On. When not connected to Wi-Fi, use your cellular network to automatically back up to iCloud.
So you have options on this screen as you flick to the right.
Backup now. Button.
You can force a manual backup if it's necessary. I make the habit of checking on this once in a while. Theoretically, and those of you who've worked with me know I love to use that word. Theoretically, when you have iCloud backup turned on, anytime you plug your phone or your iPad in overnight and you're connected to a Wi-Fi network, it's supposed to, at some point in the morning, do a backup itself. So usually it does.
Last successful backup, 2 a.m.
So mine was 2 a.m. this morning was my last successful backup. So I like to check on this once in a while to make sure that the last backup is within the previous day. If that's not the case, I simply go over to the backup now and double tap on it and force it to backup. One thing that does happen on occasion is something will happen in the backup process and it will get corrupted, and that will hang a backup. So you might have to go into the manage area and delete the backup and then force it to manually back up again to get things get the machinery going, the right direction. Because as I said, you want to back up. You want to have your data backed up. If you're the type of person who really doesn't use the phone for much, you don't have app data, you don't have, a lot of things that you do on your phone, then that's fine. I have worked with people and I know people, in my everyday life, my circle of friends and family who are not significant phone users. So backing up may not be the most important aspect of their world, one of the things on their radar, because they simply just don't do enough with the phone to make that a real necessary thing. But most of us mortals, we tend to use our phones in a variety of different ways. Now, backing up your phone does not technically completely back up your apps. That's not necessary because Apple keeps track of the apps, whether you buy them or they're free. So if you have to restore from your iCloud backup, you have the ability to simply re-download the apps. It keeps track of what you've had on your phone, so it will set up the same way you had it if you need to restore from an iCloud backup, but it doesn't actually keep the apps in your iCloud backup space. So just, keep that in mind. But, if you do have to restore from an iCloud backup, you will still have to re-log into, any of your apps that do require an ID and a password. So for example, banking apps, or if you play specific games that require that you log in, you're probably going to have to log in again when you restore from an iCloud backup. Now, an iCloud backup is also important if you're not going to do a direct transfer, if you get a new iPhone. So for example, if my previous situation where you have an iPhone 10, you go out and it's about time. You go out and you buy yourself a 14 Pro or a 14 Pro Max. So you can have two choices. You can either do a direct transfer from iPhone to iPhone where you can set it up so that your iPhone 10 will it transfer its data to your 14 so that the 14 kind of looks exactly like the home screen and everything the way you set it up. So when it's done, all is done, it kind of mirrors exactly what the iPhone 10 was. Or if you don't want to do it that way, you can do a manual setup and then select to restore from an iCloud backup, and it will show you your last iCloud backup, and then it will restore from there. Now, again, provided that you're staying up to date with your iCloud backups, your phone will then appear, or your iPad will then appear as it exactly did, prior, because it's taking, your settings and everything from your iCloud backup and, putting it on your new phone. So there's ways that those are specific ways in which keeping an iCloud backup can be very advantageous to you as a user. Now, again, just like I said with the Mac, there may be situations where restoring from an iCloud backup is not intelligent, in the sense that if you have some kind of a problem with your phone that is deep rooted in the iOS itself, restoring from a backup is only going to bring the problem to the phone again in some cases. Not all the time, but in some cases. So you may be forced to have to go the old school way and set up your phone as a brand new device and then manually bring everything over, download from the App Store, go into your history and just double tap on re-download for each of the apps that you want back on your phone. And if you created folders, you're going to have to go in again and, kind of set that up as you go along. And then, you have the Files app. So if you're using iCloud Drive or Google Drive, or OneDrive or whatever the case may be, you still have access to material. So it's not necessarily as important as a Mac, where you have, Finder and a file system and folders and stuff that you're saving into. So it does make things a little bit easier as far as your choices go, if you ever find yourself in a situation where you have to redo your phone. I've only had this happen once in my life, where an Apple person recommended, and I'm trying to think if it was the 8, the 7 or the 8, I forget which model I had at the time, and I was having really strange issues with the phone, just locking up and having to do hard restarts to get it going again. And I brought it to an Apple store. I was actually on vacation with Trish in Rhode Island, and I went to the Apple store in Providence, and the guy basically said, I hate to tell you this, but I think what you're going to need to do is just wipe your phone and don't restore from your iCloud backup. Instead, just do a start it up as a new device and just do everything manually. I was not very pleased with that solution, but I took his advice and I did it. It took me, at least a lot less time than it would have done with the Mac. When I'd done it with the Mac, it took me a couple of weeks to get everything back to the way that I wanted it. But with the phone, it took a few days. But in the end, it was worth it, because the phone was running like a champ. All the problems that I was having were gone. So I haven't had, knock on wood, I haven't had to do anything like that lately, but I just had to advise one of my family members who was having significant issues with their phone to do my oldest nephew, to kind of wipe his phone and start it over again. Fortunately, he's pretty tech savvy, just followed my advice and my instructions, and he got everything up and running and is happy. So sometimes it is necessary to have to do that. But, again, the iCloud backup is your key. And it's just like I said about time machine. It is one of these things that requires little to no thought. Once you set it up, I advise you that you have to do is go in and just make sure that the backups are happening. Make sure that the last successful backup says the previous morning. That's the only time there's going to be intervention involved, where you might have to, basically go in and, make sure that there's no corrupted backups that's causing the phone not to be able to back up. And you'll know that because if you do the manual backup and you see it'll come up with a message that will tell you that there's a problem with the backup,
Screen dimmed.
and it will kind of advise you to delete your previous backup and then do the backup again. So it's not like it leaves you clueless. It will let you know if there for some reason is an issue with the backup. Now, again, knock on wood, I've not seen that happen for me in a couple of years. So I've consistently been backing this phone up nightly. My iPad, whenever I really don't, I hate to say it. I know there are some people, and I know Matt and Cliff, or Matt in particular, would get very offended by this, but I'm not a big iPad user. I mainly use it for training people on iPads when I need to, and I use it for odds and ends for sometimes I use it as a reading device for electronic books. Sometimes I use it for specific apps, but for the most part, it's sitting up on my shelf, and I only turn it on when it's necessary. So I'll back it up manually when I do use it, just to make sure. And in the same, my iPod Touch I use a lot more because I'm always using it when I work out in the mornings as an iPod for music and audiobooks. So that gets backed up regularly. But the thing is, you don't have to be tech savvy to manage this stuff. That's the one point I want to make about both the Mac and iOS, because I've heard some clients say, well, I'm just not good with this stuff. And to me, that's just kind of making excuses, because you really don't have to be. It's not like you have to have a degree in computer science to be able to put Time Machine into action or to set up your iCloud backup. Apple has deliberately made these things work for you as a consumer. They've made it very easy, very transparent, so that you don't have to have a degree in computer science to manage your backups. Now, there may be, I don't know, because I've just not really researched it, and maybe somebody on this call will know, but I don't think there is solutions in the same way that you have potentially for the Mac, where you have super duper carbon copy cloner, Backblaze, other different services that you could pay for to back up, or at least have available. I don't think there is for the phone. And something, I know this is kind of off topic, but it just jumped into my mind, because I know there's a few people on this call that have asked me in the past, have expressed a minor interest in the Apple Certified Support Professional route, the course. I just discovered or learned that Apple has changed the entire way. It's not called the ACSP anymore. It's called the Apple Device Management course. Now, when you take this course, not only do you learn about the Mac and its guts, but you also have to have knowledge with iOS and iPad OS. And everything is done online. And then when you go through the online course route, you then take the exam, the Apple Device Management exam, to become certified at the end. I am going to start investigating the accessibility. They've asked me to make sure that everything in the course is accessible to blind people. So I'm going to get a pretty good firsthand taste. But I find the reason why I bring this up is I find it interesting that they're actually combining Mac and iOS and iPad OS into one certification, because I've been asked many, 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 many times over the years, is there an iOS, certification course? Is there a training guide you can buy for iOS? And the answer has always been no. And Apple never seemed to have a interest in making a certification specifically for iOS. So now I see what the answer to that was, is that they were planning to kind of streamline everything into one certification. So if anybody's interested in that, you can contact me privately, and whatever I learn, I will pass along to you, and I will set myself up to be able to teach people. Apparently, I've been told by Apple that there is still going to be a lot of mentoring involved as far as me having to train people, because there's article links and things that you have to be able to explain to clients so that they know exactly what they're working with. So we'll see what happens. But anyway, there you go with Mac and the iOS backup strategies. So the thing I really want to emphasize to sort of tie everything together, dovetail it all here, is that you really want to have in your conscious awareness, let me put it to you that way, a strategy of some kind in how, and backing up all your devices. And because Apple makes it so easy, you don't have to spend a lot of effort and time thinking about it. You just set things up, kick it off, and let the computer and the iPhone and the iPad do its thing. You got to just check once in a while, make sure things are running smoothly, but usually the Mac or the iPhone or the iPad will indicate if there is some kind of an issue. Like, for example, if you don't remember to go into your iCloud settings and your backups on your phone, if it doesn't back up, it's just like the Mac. After 10 or so days, you start getting these little wonderful love notes from the system that tells you, hey, you haven't had a successful iCloud backup in 14 days. You might want to look into that. So it's not like it goes under the radar where it's not going to kind of warn you that you have a problem, Houston. So just keep that in mind. And once you get it going, I really hope that nobody has to find themselves in a situation where they really need to fall upon it to, get their system restored or their iPhone restored. But having the peace of mind of a backup strategy will definitely take a lot of mental stress off of you, should you ever be in a situation where you need to restore your Mac or restore your phone, whether it be because of an emergency or because of choice, where let's say you buy a brand new Mac, you've had your Mac Mini or your MacBook Pro from 2016, and now it's time to move on. So at least you can get all your stuff, onto the machine exactly how how it appeared and where it was located, so it's familiar to you. So little things like that really do go a long way to make such transitions a lot easier for you. That's the one beautiful thing. It was driven home to me again when I got my MacBook Pro M1 and I was upgrading from the previous MacBook Pro. And then when I got my iPhone 14 and upgraded from the previous model, just how easy it was to do and how much work I didn't have to do because of the fact that I've kept my backup strategy, going and have maintained them. So, little things like that really do make a big difference especially if you're not a very tech savvy person. Not all of us are. And, it's something I've obviously learned as a trainer, and you have to adapt your training style and what you teach people to their interests and capabilities or whatever you want to call it. So there just aren't a lot of us blind people as well as sighted people who really, I don't want to say have an affinity. I don't think I know people that have an affinity for this stuff. You hear about people who are dog whisperers or horse whisperers or cat whisperers. I do know a few guys who are tech whisperers far beyond my capabilities. Just people who live and breathe this stuff in a way that you just can't, like, you really think they got a part of their brain is machine by the way they can pick up any gadget. They can figure out how to work it in a couple of minutes. They can look at an operating system or settings and they can figure things out and really look like they're pros, by operating it. I wish I had that capacity. I mean, I straddle the line, between a Mac and Apple person, and I've had to kind of go back a little bit into Windows for, make some extra money, getting hired to do some Windows training for HKNC and a couple of state agencies. So I've had to sort of get back into refreshing myself about JAWS and Windows. So straddling those two lines for me has taught, it's kind of emphasized to me that I am not as much of the computer whisperer as I know. I have two really close friends in my world that I admire because these guys just know this stuff, and you can ask them a question, and if they don't know the answer, they will literally get back to you in 5 minutes. And that's not like I'm not exaggerating or dramatic, saying it for dramatic impact. That's just the reality of these two guys, because when you give them a problem that they don't know the answer to, they're almost insulted by the fact that they don't know the immediate answer, and they're not going to go on with the rest of their life until they have the answer to your question or your problem. So I guess I'm kind of blessed that I'm not that much, but still, I have been told by certain individuals in my life that I can be like a dog with a bone when it comes to this material. But anyway, that is, why I really try to emphasize to people about backup solutions, because they're so easy. It's not like there's a lot of work involved in getting things set up and maintaining it for yourself. So if there's anything that you do kind of take from this lesson, just keep that in the back of your mind. If you've not already begun to do it, it doesn't take a lot of time to start backing your Mac up. It certainly doesn't take a lot of time to get your iPhone backing up. Just go into settings and turn it on, and you're good to go. So that's my advice to start 2023. If you have not had a backup solution, make that it's a little late for a couple of days, but make that part of your New Year's resolution as a good computer / iDevice user. So do we have any questions?
I understand that with iOS and the backups, you can only keep the most recent backup. There is no history of backup.
Yes.
It sounds like with Mac, you have a history of backups available.
Yeah, that's a major difference. I'm glad you kind of pointed that out, because that can be useful, because you may want to pick not the most recent backup to restore from. So that's the one disadvantage. Like iCloud will sometimes offer you two options, but it's usually not so good options. So that is a good point, that with the Mac and Time Machine, if you're keeping a pretty regular backup schedule, you do have multiple, backups you can choose from. So if you don't want to do yesterday to restore from, you can do last week, which can sometimes, especially if you're trying to troubleshoot, a specific thing that you did to the computer to start causing it problems.
Okay. Could you tell us what Time Capsule is? I'm new to MacBook.
It used to be, you can probably still find them. Apple used to have their own line of routers. So they had 3 routers. They had the Express, the Extreme, and the Time Capsule. Now, the Time Capsule router was a router, but it also included a 2 or 3 terabyte drive. So you could do Time Machine backups over a network. You wouldn't need a physical disk to connect. And you also could take a Time Capsule and connect an external drive. So if you wanted additional, flexibility, like I have a 6 terabyte drive that I've connected to my Time Capsule partitioned. So I have a lot of backup power. So I've read places, and I've heard that Apple may be going back into the router business. There's been some chatter about Time Capsule coming back because of the demand from people. And the beauty of this, by the way, was that you would use an application in your application/utilities folder called Airport Utility. And as a blind person, you could very easily manage a network. Everything was accessible. Everything was straightforward. You literally could set up a wireless network and have all of your devices in your house going within, I kid you not, 5 minutes. And it was very easy, as somebody who was not very network savvy, to be able to really do some crazy stuff, reserve IP addresses and port forwarding and, things that would be a little bit more advanced and sophisticated. Airport Utility made very easy to manage. So I kind of miss those days, and I am hoping that Apple will resume the Time Capsule line, because I'd like to update my Time Capsule and get something, with a little bit more robust kick to it.
Thank you. One last question. Do you have any suggestions, or are there any limitations on external hard drives that are compatible with MacBook?
All of the drives that are out there, Seagate, Western Digital, Lacey, they are all compatible. You just may have to format the drive if you want to use it for manual backups. But with Time Machine, since Time Machine does the work for you, You just plug in the drive and let Time Machine do the work. It'll erase the drive and reformat it as APFS, and you'll be good to go. So, you know, you can find, most of the drives I have sitting around here are the little Western Digital My Passports. They're like the size of a pack of cigarettes. They're really nice little drives. All right, guys. Well, you all take it
Okay.
easy. Happy New Year to everyone.
Happy New Year. Have a
Thank
good
you.
night.
Happy New Year.
All right, guys.
Remember, for all Mac, iOS, and any kind of Apple training, visit macfortheblind.com. John Panarese has some free courses and some reasonable paid courses. You won't be disappointed. See you next time.